Here in Orlando, Florida, at the Defending the American Dream Summit, honored to be joined by Senator Ted Cruz of the great state of Texas. Senator, good to see you, sir.
Cameron, it's great to join you.
Okay, so I'm a big Twitter guy. You're a big Twitter guy. On your Twitter feed lately, you're talking a lot about two things: Obamacare and the Second Amendment.
Yep.
Let's talk about the Second Amendment first.
Sure.
Let's talk about what happened this week with President Obama and the executive order on guns. What is it about this administration that loves going around you guys?
Well, listen, there's a combination of two things. Number one, we have never seen an administration mount such a consistent assault on our Bill of Rights. Whether it is the First Amendment targeting religious speech, targeting free speech, whether it is the Second Amendment, and this is the most anti-Second Amendment administration we have ever seen, whether it is the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, whether it is our privacy, this administration has systematically gone after the Bill of Rights. But secondly, this administration has repeatedly been willing to circumvent Congress, to circumvent the law, to disregard the law, whether it is Obamacare and the president saying he's not going to enforce it against big corporations, he's not going to enforce it against members of Congress, he's going to pick and choose which laws to follow, or most recently on guns, where through executive orders he can't get through his anti-gun legislation in Congress, and so his approach is instead we're going to disregard the law, we're going to disregard Congress, and just use executive fiat. And that's not the way the Constitution is meant to work. You know, under the Constitution, the president has a responsibility to, quote, take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And I will say it is sad that we have seen this president so willing to disregard the law, to flout Congress, and ultimately I think it is indicative of a lack of respect for the American people, a belief that the agenda that this administration is fighting for is more important than the views and values of the American people and the Constitution that protects our freedom.
You're a busy guy, Senator, so I don't have too much time, and I know this is kind of a tough question, but can you try to break down the argument between Obamacare, defunding the government? Like if you had to do an elevator speech on it, explain it.
Obamacare is the #1 job killer in this country. It is hurting people all across this country. It is causing people to lose their jobs, people not to get hired. It is causing people to have their hours forcibly reduced to 29 hours a week. It is causing jobs to move overseas to China. It is causing people's health insurance premiums to skyrocket. It is killing jobs, and the people that are hurt the most by Obamacare are the most vulnerable among us. They're young people, they're Hispanics, they're African Americans, they're single moms, they're people who are struggling to climb the economic ladder. They're the ones who are getting laid off. They're the ones who are getting their hours forcibly reduced. And so we need to bring people together. We need leadership to stop this train wreck that is Obamacare and to get back jobs and economic growth. We have the best opportunity to do so right now with defunding Obamacare. Between now and September 30th is when this fight is engaged. And the way it's going to happen is not going to be through Washington. It's not going to be through elected officials in Washington. It's going to be through the American people. You know, in just the last few weeks, we have seen nearly 1 million Americans go to don'tfundit.com, sign a national petition to defund Obamacare. And they picked up the phones, they've called their senators, they've called their representatives. How do we get this done? Between now and September 30th, we need to see millions upon millions of Americans going to don'tfundit.com, signing the petition, calling their elected representatives, and getting others to do the same. The key to winning this fight is we have to take the power back from Washington. We have to empower the American people. And if the American people stand up and hold our elected officials accountable, every one of them, including me, that's how we stop this job killer that is Obamacare. That's how we restore economic growth and jobs. And that's how we make it a reality again that people who are struggling to climb the economic ladder can achieve the American dream.
Last question, sir. Talk about the voting, the VRA. And anytime I get to interview Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General Abbott, he's always very complimentary of you. Talk about the DOJ's attacks on the state of Texas when it comes to the Voting Rights Act and other things.
Well, it has been sad in the last 4.5 years. We have seen the most partisan Department of Justice this country has ever seen. Eric Holder should resign. And if he doesn't resign, President Obama should fire him. Why? Because he refuses to apply the law, because he has violated the law, and because he has run the Department of Justice in a partisan political manner. The Department of Justice is suing the state of Texas. Why? Because they don't want Texas to enforce photo ID laws. They don't want Texas to protect voter integrity. And you know who gets hurt the most when you have voter fraud? The people who get hurt the most are typically minority voters, because if you look at the voters' fraud scandals that have occurred, they usually target minority voters and steal their votes. But sadly, this administration behaves often like it's an arm of the DNC rather than the Department of Justice that's supposed to enforce the law in a uniform way. We've seen this Department of Justice with Fast and Furious willfully, deliberately sell illegal weapons to Mexican drug cartels. Those weapons, in turn, have been used to murder hundreds of civilians and at least one federal law enforcement official. And Eric Holder and the president, there's been no accountability. That is unfortunate. The Department of Justice should be above politics. It should be above partisan reproach. It should be focused on upholding the law and defending the Constitution. And sadly, this Department of Justice has turned into a political hammer to target the administration's enemies. Just like the IRS has been doing, the Department of Justice has been doing it as well, and it is wrong. When the machinery of government is used for partisan political purposes, it's wrong, it's un-American, and it undermines the rule of law. It undermines our Constitution.
Senator, I'd love to talk to you about Syria, but we don't have an hour, and we can't figure out Obama's foreign policy in the remaining time we have. Thanks for your time here. Appreciate your time on NRA News.
Well, thank you, Cameron. And let me say a final word to all of your listeners. When we have had the battles over guns in the U.S. Senate, President Obama tried to use the tragic shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, as an excuse not to go after violent criminals. And I think we should come after violent criminals, come down on them like a ton of bricks. Instead, President Obama used it as an excuse to try to undermine our Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. And that was wrong. It was manipulative. It was inconsistent with the Constitution. What happened that changed that fight is you got engaged. What happened was millions of NRA members, millions of Americans spoke up, began calling their senators, calling their representatives, and saying, protect the Bill of Rights, protect the Constitution, protect our Second Amendment. And because of your leadership, because of your active engagement, our elected officials in Washington listened to the people. And when President Obama's proposals to undermine the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms came to a vote on the Senate floor, every single one of them was voted down because of you, because of your leadership. So I want to say thank you. Thank you for your passion to protecting the Bill of Rights. And the way we're going to win the fight to stop the job killer that is Obamacare is that very same grassroots activism. It is Americans rising up by the millions, signing the national petition at don'tfundit.com and getting their friends to do the same. If we hold elected officials accountable, that's how we get back to the Constitution. And it is an honor, it is a privilege to stand side by side with each and every one of you.
Senator Cruz, thanks for your time, sir.
Thank you.